For those of you who thought they had suffered enough from Sartre's extreme thoughts on freedom, responsibility, authenticity, and bad faith, even more controversial and possibly pushing to the limits of truth is Sartre's theory on intersubjectivity, being for others, le pour autrui. Sartre is not convinced with Heidegger. He says this is abstract truth. It's true that Dasein is Mietsein. So what? So what? That doesn't even grasp the real drama of the problem. And Husserl's idea that something like empathy can exist, well, maybe in transcendental consciousness, but Sartre says not normally. Normally, the relationship between people and even between groups of people, and this is a very fundamental and still, I think, really very contemporary thought, is the phenomena of the gaze, G-A-Z-E. Some people think I'm talking about homosexuality. I'm talking about the gaze, the look, the gaze. This is what happens between people. There's the gaze in which I, and you too, we reduce each other within our intentionality to that which we perceive or want to perceive or think we must perceive. This is happening all the time, and it is an inevitable conflict. This is what's happening all the time. In looking at each other, we reduce each other, so there's a conflict, kind of a war, perpetual war, constant reduction of the other to what the other is to me, and the other is reducing me to what I am in the eyes of the other. You are reducing me, and I'm a bourgeois, I'm a throne project teacher. I'm reducing you, students. So this is what happens all the time.
Hello and welcome back to First Philosophy. My name is Kas Molenaar.
I'm Sonia Schwetz.
And today we're continuing our talk on Sartre, as well as very shortly introducing another famous phenomenologist.
Well, you're teasing it, you're not saying the name.
We're going to talk about Maurice Merleau-Ponty.
Yeah, the big MP.
The big MP, which in this lecture does not really have as prominent of a place as he could have. Mm-hmm. But the suggestion should not be made that is because he is not that important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Merleau-Ponty very famously is one of the big guys in my mind when I think about the start of, starts-ish of phenomenology. It's obviously Husserl, it's obviously Heidegger, and it's also very obviously Merleau-Ponty. It's just, I think, maybe to provide a slight context of why he might not be discussed too much within this specific series of lectures, even though it is focusing on phenomenology, is, as we've already said, phenomenology is not a very predefined school of thought or method rather than an approach, which means that there are lots of different branches that it has. And I think Merleau-Ponty just falls within a branch that is different from the lineage that Awee has been tracing.
Exactly.
More or less starting with Kierkegaard, moving through, mentioned, of course, Dostoevsky and Kafka, Sartre. So we're going really through this phenomenology, existentialism, and we'll see where we end up.
Yeah.
And Merleau-Ponty plays a very big role here, but he's a little bit different. He does something a little bit different, and we'll discover it today.
Yeah, and Merleau-Ponty's branch of phenomenology is really a different branch. Mm-hmm. It is also more distant from some of the philosophers we've talked about. And this will come up. The only thing that we wanted to say in advance is, although we're now going to focus on Sartre for a while and then move to Merleau-Ponty, you can look forward to Merleau-Ponty.
Yeah.
Because it is really, really interesting and really, really good philosophy and phenomenology.
And I'd say you can still keep looking forward to Sartre unless you're Kas, of course.
No.
But we're dwelling with Sartre. We're learning about him and what he said. And we are going to go into a very big thing that Awee teased before. We're talking, of course, about Sartre's intersubjectivity and just how uneasy it is.
And I think this is one of the things that I really do enjoy.
Of course.
This specific we will talk about. Awee will talk about reducing the other, and this was in the first things that really got me hooked into philosophy. This idea, I think this is really good.
Okay,
I think this is really interesting.
Well then, let's learn about reducing the other.
Let's learn about reducing the other.
Sartre gives an example. There's a little girl doing an exam. And all of a sudden, she's working hard and she really did her homework well. She's really confident she will succeed. She's doing well. All of a sudden, the teacher walks up to her and says, "You're cribbing. You're cheating. I saw you, you were cheating." The girl wasn't cheating at all, but she becomes all red in the face. The whole world collapses. All of a sudden, she is reduced to a cheater. This is a dramatic example Sartre gives. But in normal life, this is what happens all the time. You call me a teacher, I call you, reduce you, which is unfair. You're so much more than that. I'm sure you are. You're so much more than that. But I reduce you to students. And Sartre asks himself, how do we ever meet the other? Because if I'm constantly reducing the other, I never meet the other. And Sartre says there's only one way that I really feel the presence of the other, and that is when the other is looking at me. Sartre gives a famous example of someone who's in the corridor of a hotel, and he's looking through the keyhole of a room. Long ago, doors had keyholes. Yeah? So he's looking through the keyhole to a couple in the room. And he's watching them, and he's thinking about what he thinks of them, and he's laughing about them, and he says, well, I do a much better job than the husband does, and whatever he's thinking, that's looking through. And all of a sudden, there are a couple of people walking into the corridor, and they're seeing him, the pervert looking through the keyhole. And Sartre says, that is the moment when I meet the other, when the other reduces me. That is when I really realize the other. As long as I'm intentionally involved in the world, with my freedom and my responsibility, I'm constantly, with my own intentionalities, interpret the world, as I'm completely free and completely responsible to do so, all of a sudden I realize that someone else can also reduce me to something that he or she thinks of me. This goes for all human relationships, Sartre says. For instance, also for pity. If you have pity on someone, we might say, well, that is a nice attitude. You have pity for someone. You feel sorry for someone. No. You're reducing the other to object of your pity. And even, Sartre says, this counts for love. The relationship of love, and please don't take him too seriously, I don't want to be responsible for you breaking up your relationship, but every relationship of love is an impossible relationship. It's as such impossible. If I'm in love with someone, I want to not really possess the other, but I want the other to be how I want the other to be. But that's impossible, because I can never reach the pour soi of the other. Never. I can never, ever come as far as that I really reach and own the pour soi of the other. So that trajectory, which is being in love, is doomed to fail. So Sartre says many then decide to play it the other way around. And don't think of me when I'm talking about this. You try to become someone who is lovable. You try to become someone who is attractive, who is nice, who is to be loved. So the other will love you. You can put a lot of effort in that. You make yourself, but then you realize that you lose your pour soi, then you lose your own being in the world, because you are only an object. You are reducing yourself to an object of admiration, of love, of affection. It's always an inevitable conflict. It's the original meaning of being with others is a perpetual conflict. It's dire straits. It's always reducing the other. Now, the actuality of this is that we have, in fact, realized over the past centuries the truth of Sartre's theory. The way the gaze, again, G-A-Z-E, works. We speak about the white gaze, the way white people look at the world. There's this documentary by James Baldwin, I Am Not Your Negro. Really watch this documentary. It's a documentary on everyday racism. Everyday racism. There's everyday sexism all around. In my opinion, there's also everyday ableism. In some way, we reduce the world to people who are beautiful, strong, successful, and the rest we think are less. This phenomena of the gaze, of reducing the other to what the other is in our eyes, and this goes between countries, between cultures, all the time. And according to Sartre, and this is something that we really have to think about, so it's like a wake-up call. First and foremost, it should be a wake-up call, which I would say demands for stirring thinking. Realize how much everyday sexism, racism is in your gaze, in the way you look at the world. Because Sartre just tries to remind us, phenomenologically, this is how Sartre's phenomenology works. We might disagree, and we'll see in Levinas there's a completely other view on intersubjectivity than Sartre has it. Again, I believe that Sartre is telling us something that we cannot easily deny. We cannot easily overcome. There is this enormous problem constantly of reducing the others to what they are in our gaze. It's impossible to come beyond this. Now, after being in nothingness, Sartre still was an author. He wrote famous plays, Huis Clos, No Exit, which with the famous idiom, hell is other people. So this is what intersubjectivity is. Hell is other people. Hell is others reducing me. Some people talk about narrative identity. We have all these postmoderns, they can't get rid of Descartes, so they find something new. So we don't have an identity. No, that's old-fashioned thinking, metaphysics. We have a narrative identity, and that means the stories we tell about ourselves year in and year out, and phase in, and after different phases of life, everyone has a narrative. But you can look at me and see that I'm sickened by it. Our narrative identity is not that important. It's what others tell about us. That is our narrative identity. Let's not forget about that. So it's very important to realize how heuristically rich Sartre's intuition on intersubjectivity are, no matter how hard to stomach they are. He also wrote a play, Dirty Hands, which is about taking responsibility in a conflict, in a war. You have to realize that whatever you do with the best of intentions, there will always be a lot of things that you've never intended and that belong to your actions. Not to your actions, but they belong to your responsibility. He wrote novels, Roads to Freedom, Chemin de la Liberté. And he founded a journal in 1945, Le Temps Moderne, which was an allusion to Modern Times, the film by Chaplin. It was a very famous journal for many years in France. Then he wrote in 1960 the Critique of Dialectical Reason, and in which he tries to make existentialism political. He tries to combine Kierkegaard and Marx, he says. It's a very difficult book and not very convincing, but he tries to show that the pour soi can become a group, and then it has, as a group, a responsibility. Big problem, of course, is that it's still the problem of groups against group in an inevitable conflict. Sartre was interested in politics, but very controversially. He visited Algeria during the French oppression, Russia, Cuba, China. He supported the communist revolts of Fidel Castro. In 1964, they decided to give him the Nobel Prize. And Sartre refused. Sartre refused the Nobel Prize. So, quoting Kierkegaard, "What labels me negates me. Then I will become part of your bourgeois establishment. I will be one of the winners of the Nobel Prize. Then you will have me exactly where you want me to be. I'm one of the establishment Nobel Prize winner. No, I'm Jean-Paul Sartre, and I'll fuck up your lives till the day I die," which he really did. Because whenever there was a journal prohibited in France, he became main editor. The Cause du Peuple, which was a Maoist journal, terribly Maoist journal, and Sartre, half blind, he was worse off than me, tried to sell these journals in the streets of Paris, and everybody said, "We have to arrest him, we have to arrest him." And de Gaulle, who was then president of France, said, "I will not arrest Voltaire." You know, Sartre is one of those great thinkers like Voltaire that always remind us how self-confident we are. He was also one of the founding fathers of the hippie movement, Sartre. He wrote the famous pamphlet with Daniel Cohn-Bendit, All Power to the Imagination, the Verbeelding aan de Macht. Under the cobblestones lies the beach. This was this idea that bourgeois should be eradicated and only people should be. So Sartre was an impossible person until the day he died, fortunately to all the people in charge in France. And there were about 50,000 people at his funeral. And then, of course, the reception began of Sartre. And the big problem with Sartre is there's no ethics in Sartre. He's talking about absolute freedom. He's talking about absolute responsibility. But it's even worse than in Heidegger. There's no way in Sartre that you can find what to do, how to act, how to take your responsibility. And Sartre even ended being in nothingness with a small note on ethics, which is actually no ethics. He says, ethics is necessary and impossible. Something to think about. Ethics is necessary, we can't do without ethics, but it's impossible. Man is a useless passion, a passion inutile. We are a useless passion, there's nothing to be done. Simone de Beauvoir, lifelong companion of Sartre, wrote a booklet, Pour une morale de l'ambiguïté. It was translated, I think, A Moral of Ambiguity, in which she tries a wonderful book, inspired by Sartre, but also de Beauvoir, who's a completely independent thinker, always, and maybe better even than Sartre. Her book on old age is very good, and I'm reading it now with much recognition. It's a terrible book. But it's an attempt to the ambiguity of morality. So we have to navigate through contingency. We have to navigate through it. Sartre may be relentless. Sartre didn't believe that any ethics is possible. De Beauvoir said, and in the summary of the class, I gave some notions of what de Beauvoir is doing. I have to go on considering the time. So Sartre is relentless in freedom, in responsibility, also in intersubjectivity. There's a very nice documentary made by Laura van Doren. Maybe you know of her. She's a Dutch stand-up philosopher, very good, under the title Sartre Says Sorry. In this documentary or film, Sartre comes out of his graves and he apologizes. He apologizes for what he's done, because he asked too much. According to Laura, he just asked too much. You can't make everybody absolutely responsible for their own fate. Although I respect Laura very much, I think this is not what Sartre is really doing. He's just telling us that also in Sartre, it's all about rising to the occasion of your freedom. Don't complain, don't sulk, don't find refuge, don't find excuses. Actually, this is what Nietzsche called amor fati. Embrace your fate, embrace your fate. Have the courage that whatever happens to you is yours. Don't complain, take it. So but I don't want to hold anything against Laura, but Sartre is not as impossible as he may sound. He's just telling us the way we are, but there's one aspect which is a bit of a problem in Sartre, and that is the pour soi, that he calls human beings pour soi. Are we really these mental acts constantly spreading nothingnesses around us? Is that really adequate phenomenology? I still think that Sartre should always the rest of your life be whispering in your ear, not too loudly.
So lots of interesting things up till now. And
Yeah.
I think one of the kind of the most controversial ones is this thing that Awee brings up, this impossibility of ethics, which is a very surprising, kind of a dumbfounding thing to suddenly discover about Sartre, that there's almost this impossibility of ethics, because I don't know if you remember, dear listener, when we just moved on to Sartre from Heidegger, what Awee mentioned is Sartre, one of the biggest criticisms to Heidegger from Sartre was just how abstract Heidegger was, how removed from the life and the passion of life and the suffering of life, how kind of detached it was, which was a big criticism,
Yeah.
Therefore it kind of doesn't work. It lacks this concreteness, this worldliness almost. Sorry to use Heidegger's term for this. So to me, with that in mind, suddenly moving on to impossibility of ethics is a very, very weird thing. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting, yeah. But expand.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to expand on is examining what impossibility of ethics means here, because it's easy to jump to a conclusion, basically jump to nihilism from here. The impossibility of ethics somehow does not absolve one from grappling with it, and that hence the difficult freedom, which is, hence the existentialism is a humanism idea of being condemned to be free. It's almost like even though you cannot win ever, you still have to continuously try, which, of course, if dear listener, if you've ever heard of the myth of Sisyphus, this will sound very familiar. But we're not talking about that.
No, let's not go on a Camus tangent for now.
No Camus tangents, no candy for Kas.
Is Camus better for you than Sartre?
Let's not delve into this.
I thought I set a little trap there.
Okay, let's go on a very, very short Camus tangent then. An idea that I think is underappreciated in philosophy is how long Camus sticks with meaninglessness. So where Heidegger and Sartre have, and Kierkegaard and Nietzsche have like this, there's meaninglessness, hence you should jump into faith, or hence you are responsible for everything, or hence whatever.
I don't know if that applies to Nietzsche, but yes.
No. It may be, but Nietzsche says there are no values, so you can create your own.
Right, sure, yeah.
If painting with a very broad brush.
Yes.
And the fact that Camus is just trying to stick with this meaninglessness, refusing to budge away from it for as long as he reasonably can.
No.
I do really like that exercise.
Okay.
I think that is really excellent philosophy.
Well, beautiful tangent on Camus. But yeah, going back to Sartre, this grappling with impossibility of ethics while also having to not give up, I think it just outlines the way that maybe I think the most productive, the best way of engaging with philosophy at all. It is condemned to always talk about things that are unquestionable and unresolvable in final instance. And the good thing about them is that doesn't mean that we should abandon them.
Yeah.
And Sartre, with his life, also illustrates this principle of even if there is an impossibility of ethics and impossibility of thinking through, he didn't shy away from still doing stuff. Of course, it's very relevant that he was French, and the love for protesting is right there, as we all know. And he took quite active part in the 1968 protests, specifically, Marxist, Maoist, mostly protests.
The student revolts.
Exactly, the famous student revolt of 1968, and got into a trouble, which Awee alludes to.
Yeah. Awee alludes to the story that Sartre was supposed not to be locked up because we're not going to arrest a Voltaire here in France, here in Paris. And not arresting a Voltaire, it's just such a good story that if you don't know the story and you hear we're not going to arrest a Voltaire, it might sound like we're not going to arrest a famous or influential or important philosopher, and maybe that is also partly why. But Voltaire, towards the end of his life, Voltaire was banned from Paris, even though he loved Paris, but he was banned from Paris. And towards the end of his life, he wrote a play, which was performed in Paris. And I believe this was towards the end of his life. I'm almost sure. But Voltaire went there. He went to Paris. He went to the performance of the play. And people just adored him, applauded him. They celebrated him. And even though he was banned and he should not have been there, he was not arrested. It was too. You cannot arrest this man. You cannot do it.
Yeah.
And having such a figure like that, and having kept that memory alive, that even though Sartre was doing like protesting and undermining and whatever, you cannot arrest a Voltaire.
Yeah, people love him. He sells out stadiums, so to speak, meaning his lectures are overflowing.
No, yeah, but that's the story from Existentialism is a Humanism, right? That in 46, like, he could not even enter the venue because there were too many people there for his readings, for his lecture.
It's a shame they didn't invent Ahoy.
He would have thrived in the Gelredome. Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah, and I think another interesting, and I think this is really where Awee is. There are a lot of places where he is at his best, and this is one of the places where he is at his best. Talking about the gaze and talking about just how important and influential this idea of reduction in the gaze was in Sartre. Yeah,
and also being very true towards the idea that phenomenology is not an end point, but phenomenology is also a way of beginning philosophy. It's a way to start doing philosophy, because the gaze, as he shows, turns up in feminist theory, post-colonial theory, in any form of queer theory. Yeah, it shows up as a very, very important idea. And
it's almost the first philosophy.
It's almost
you could say.
Thank you, the producer. One could say that it is all that phenomenology functions as a first philosophy. No, but and it is very interesting, and also I think Awee mentions James Baldwin. Like last episode, we promised to
stop talking about literature.
Stop endlessly referring back to literature. And but James Baldwin, besides writing literature, wrote a lot of other like essays and made documentaries. It's very, very, very good. If you know the work of James Baldwin and if you know the work of Sartre, it is almost obvious to name them in such a lecture. Yet it is not often done. Like often, if you talk about Sartre, you remain talking about Sartre. Yeah. Like having this very important and very, very existential and very urgent reference, I think is magnificent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe we'll return also a bit later to just how important gaze is specifically for Awee. This is a bit of a teaser. Stay tuned. But there's more to come.
There is more to come.
And this is very significant, Kas. We've come to a big point of saying goodbye to Sartre, actually.
We will now, afterwards, we'll only be talking about Merleau-Ponty in this lecture. So this is our exit of Sartre.
How does it feel?
Well, I mean,
Kas is now dancing on the table.
No, well, I think in the very first episode, one of the very first episodes, I already, like way back, like I already mentioned not being too much of a fan of Sartre, and I mean, you should give everyone a fair chance.
True.
So I didn't want to lean into that too much whilst recording these episodes, because Sartre, so many people wanted to see him. So many people wanted to hear him speak that they flocked to the venue, and he almost couldn't enter because they really wanted to hear this story. Philosophy is not often that popular.
Yeah.
And even like the most famous philosophers nowadays, someone like Slavoj Žižek, I mean, I think that's the most obvious name. Like a lot of people like him as the caricature, or like listening to him and thinking you are quite clever for sitting there. If you really want to engage with the works of Slavoj Žižek, that is very, very difficult.
Read Less Than Nothing, insane book.
It's absolute. It is very, very technical.
Yeah.
And I think Sartre had a gift of writing things in an accessible way. And it is philosophy that I usually really, really care about. And it is that I do care about.
Yeah.
And it's philosophy that I enjoy people engaging with. So I sometimes teach high school classes in philosophy, and I try to give them a general overview, but I usually end up at phenomenology anyway, because that's just where my brain goes.
It's first philosophy.
It's first philosophy. Yeah. You, there's no way around it.
And they're in school. They have to learn the first one.
Sure. And so you start with phenomenology.
Yeah.
And when these students like start engaging with it and they start understanding it, I feel such joy and I feel so happy to see people engaging with it. So it is strange that I have this friction when it comes to engaging with Sartre, and it's almost Oedipal in nature, because Sartre was the first philosopher that I really thought, oh, this is good. Yeah. This is real good. And the more that I engaged with Sartre, but then also with other writers, Dostoevsky, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Nietzsche, Simone de Beauvoir, like the more I engaged with other thinkers, the more I saw the things that I really liked in Sartre better and more fundamental way earlier. And that is when I started to lose a lot of patience with Sartre. And that is where my hesitance usually comes from. But I also do not want to be too unfair about him.
It's almost like the first band you love.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And then afterwards you figure out, they might have took a few things from other people that I really love.
Yeah. And that's when I'm a bit negative or a bit grumpy when it comes to Sartre. It is definitely that. But sometimes I read things and come on, if you're stealing it, there's no original thinking anyway. Like people, you build on what other people are writing. There's no need to pretend to be completely original. It's nonsense anyway. But if you are taking ideas from other people, and you're not really rethinking them, and you're not really reapplying them in a way that is fundamentally different, but you're just like rehashing it. Yeah. Come on.
I see what you're saying, but I also, but we also need a person like that.
Sure.
We need a new Sartre, actually. We need people to engage with this, so that it's, but I get it, and he's also famously done bad things, and of course, my biggest gripe with it, I'm way more positive. My biggest gripe with Sartre is that he's popularized performing being a philosopher, reading, sitting at Café de Fleur. You're decked out in a suit.
Like
You're-
some friends we know.
Like some friends we know.
you're smoking cigarettes a lot, and then you're like pretending to read and pretending to write. It's really annoying to me.
it's the stereotype that Awee also alludes to in the beginning
absolutely.
of this lecture, which is previous episode. But
Who am I to say? We're also a caricature of ourselves, just in a different way.
when I had this lecture on Sartre, and Awee also gave this caricature to open the night with, this was back in 2017. I was wearing a black turtleneck. Like, people knew me for drinking red wine. I was smoking just outside before the lecture began, and I was wearing a leather jacket. It was all of them.
Oh my God.
When I had this first lecture, he ends with a kind of a nice quote, the Sartre one, at least in our year. And he says like
not revealing the year.
Go to that goes it's way too early. He kind of finishes up with when you go outside and drink, just like Sartre did, drink enough, or drink a lot, but don't forget about Sartre. And then what would we do as a group, as engaging with the caricature of Martin, just because hammered on red wine?
Yeah. And amphetamines.
But we didn't forget it.
Never forgetting it.
Yeah, and with that, never forget, but forgive and let go, and move to Maurice Merleau-Ponty.
Move to Maurice Merleau-Ponty. We will be back later to talk more about Merleau-Ponty, but for now, just enjoy it. Just enjoy the ride.
But Merleau-Ponty who was a friend of Sartre and a friend of de Beauvoir. They were at school together, or at university together. He was also co-founder of Le Temps Moderne, the journal I mentioned, the focal point of intellectual life in France for decades. But Merleau-Ponty developed a subtle and strong critique of both Sartre and Husserl. According to Merleau-Ponty, both Sartre and Husserl are unable to overcome Cartesianism, in spite of their phenomenological ambitions. Both the transcendental subject and the for itself, the pour soi, are philosophical constructs. They are philosophical constructs. They are disloyal and alien to the phenomenological approach. For sure, consciousness is special. It's a privileged phenomenon. Its intentionality, its negating powers, its constituting powers are fascinating. They're impressive. But consciousness is not an absolute phenomenon. And it is impossible to really bracket or negate the world. We are not spectators of the world. We are not as pour soi in front of the world, constantly spreading nothingness around us. No, we are dedicated to the world. What is phenomenology, he asks in the preface, to the phenomenology of perception, which is actually a phenomenology of perspectivism. Phenomenology is a philosophy that places essences back with existence. It is a philosophy for which the world is always already there, prior to reflection, like an unalienable presence, and whose entire effort is to rediscover this naive contact with the world. It is an account of lived space, lived time, and the lived world. This is about the Lebenswelt by Husserl, the lived world, but Merleau-Ponty very in detail shows how time and space are lived. Imagine someone is to be executed, and the gallows are over there, and it's about 6 meters. And the executioner says, "Come on, it's only 6 meters." You can imagine for the guy walking to the gallows, that is the longest stretch that he ever had to make. If you're in love and you're waiting for your loved one to arrive, any second lasts an hour or a lifetime. This is what lived space and lived time. This is not, space is not three-dimensional thing. It is something that we are oriented in all the time. Time is not the succession of now moments, but sometimes time lasts, sometimes time flies, sometimes time is crawling, creeping terribly. This is how it works. This is what the great, and Merleau-Ponty is one of the, at this moment, one of the most influential phenomenologists. He says if we talk about to the things themselves, that means to return to the things themselves prior to knowledge. This world of which knowledge always speaks and this world with regard to which every scientific determination is abstract, signative, and dependent, just like geography with regard to the landscape where we first learned what a forest, a meadow, or a river is. This is a wonderful expression. Science is always about the map, never about the landscape. It's about the map. Science is secondary. Perception is not science of the world. Because man is in and toward the world, and it is in the world that he knows himself. When I return to myself from the dogmatism of common sense or of science, I do not find a source of intrinsic truth, but a subject devoted and destined to the world. And he even looks at Husserl's phenomenological reduction, and he says, no, it's the reduction of Husserl goes too far. We just have to abstain from the natural attitude for a moment in order to awaken to the world. So what is happening here? The phenomenology of perception is a phenomenology of being in the world or towards the world, être au monde. We are dedicated to the world. It's not a science of the world. And the world is always there, but not as a sum of objects, but as a crossroads of perceptions. And I am an embedded subject. I'm dedicated to the world. There is no inner man. Yeah? Husserl's epoche, reconsidered, means we must abstain to return. So, momentarily parenthesizing, bracketing the world. What happens then if you just do that for a moment, Merleau-Ponty says? Then you will have an epistemological, ontological, and existential bewilderment. Wonderful. I just bracket the world. I don't trust my senses. I don't trust what anybody says. I bracket it. But make sure, Merleau-Ponty says, to do it momentarily. And then you get this strange Husserl terms, redness. I look at the world and I try to bracket all red things, I come to redness, but then I have to go back to really realize the differences and the singularity of the redness of curtains, the redness of roof tiles, and the redness of blood. So the existence of thought, just like Sartre said, precedes thinking about existence. But the existence of thought, Merleau-Ponty says, is always incarnated thought. We're talking about embedded cognition. We're talking about embedded consciousness. This is what we are, subjects which are physically embedded. We're still struggling because we stem from a long tradition from Descartes that we have this mind-body problem, and now we try to integrate the two. There's one of my best students, Sadaf Suleiki, wrote a wonderful thesis. She's a neurosurgeon also, a very successful one. She just had her PhD cum laude, believe it or not. And she wrote her thesis with me on phenomenology and neuroscience on the same team. She thinks that phenomenology and the sciences should work together to get the fullness of what is happening in our consciousness and in our brain.
Now we've learned a little bit about Merleau-Ponty, and I mean, it's never enough. It's really never enough. This is clearly, of course, we spent not that much time with him. However, if you're interested, I really, really, really encourage you, and I think Kas is enthusiastically nodding across me.
Intensely nodding. Yeah,
really encourage you to go ahead and try to acquaint yourself more with Merleau-Ponty's philosophy. And this is also, I think, something that you would be sympathetic to. I would say start with secondary literature. So read articles that people wrote on Merleau-Ponty and on the things that he covers first, because, and he is so, at least phenomenology of perception, which is what I've attempted, several chapters, is so extremely tedious to read. It's very interesting. It leads to very interesting places, but the motions of reading it can be quite discouraging if you're not motivated enough for it.
Well, and also if you don't know how to read it. Yeah. Because something that you very rarely see in philosophy in general is that Merleau-Ponty is he has a point that he wants to move towards. Yeah. So the body, the philosophy of the body. Perception starts from the body that is situated in the world. But to do so, he is challenging previous conceptions. So empiricism, rationalism, and Kantianism, the German idealism. And the way in which he does so is very, very carefully and really like
rigorously.
No, not rigorously. Gul. Generously, very, very generously explaining a position that he disagrees with, but he is giving it all the space that it can have.
Like, you don't know that he disagrees with it.
That's the point. Like if you start reading the book, you almost see, I didn't know he was a rationalist.
Yeah.
Because he is so diligently and generously explaining rationalism. And then he comes to a contradiction and then said, okay, so that's not it, and go on.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Next, empiricism. But he does, like, almost the contradiction is not a point that he spends too long on, because there's just a contradiction. He's also not really expanding on, so because there is a contradiction, he's just like, contradiction, okay, move on, next. And that way of writing takes a while. Yeah. Really takes a while, but it's such good philosophy. Yeah. Because it's not just saying, I don't agree with rationalism. He's really expanding on rationalism. Really, okay, so what would that entail? Yeah. What would that mean? And the importance of Merleau-Ponty in today's world of philosophy, as you said earlier, like, this doesn't really fit in with the line of thought in this lecture, and you would need more time to really expand on this. So it's for very good reasons that Awee gives Merleau-Ponty this place in the lecture series. But if you would look, contemporary phenomenology, and specifically phenomenology that also links up with neuroscience, relies heavily on Merleau-Ponty.
And it is incredible to see just how much and on how many occasions Merleau-Ponty was right.
He was absolutely right.
And we are just now, in terms of neuroscience, catching up with what he kind of deduced, like, this must be the case because this is the way I experience it. Yeah. And we're now catching up with the empirical kind of illustration of it. And with all of the praises and defenses in varying degrees done, we should go back and hear more on Merleau-Ponty and just how interesting and specific his philosophy and his thinking of the body is. We've talked about perception and and we will now see how the perception, without going through your head in any way, directly leads to something that will be called I can. Yeah. How perception immediately, without you having to think or understand it, goes into an ability of performing a bodily movement. Very interesting, and I wish I could hear it for the first time.
Enjoy.
But I would like to stress that the whole history of Western philosophy is a history of the forgetfulness of the body. We've seen the forgetfulness of being in Heidegger, being as a verb, but there's also the forgetfulness of the body. I just briefly want to address this. Mind you, the forgetfulness of the body is an idiom that I coined. Nobody else is talking about it, but I'm right, and it's a very interesting phenomenon. I'll just show you why. At the beginning of Western philosophy, Plato called the body a dungeon of the soul. A dungeon of the soul. Een kerker van de ziel. And when he wrote about love, in Symposium, Plato has Socrates discuss love. And Socrates says there's physical love, and in accord to Socrates' inclination, the love for a young boy. But this boy's body will age and wrinkle, Socrates says. So true love is only to be found in the world of ideas. That is true. Love, physical love, is not real love. True love is love for the ideas. The same we find in Christianity. In Matthew 26:41, there's this disdain and contempt towards the body. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. In medieval theology, there was this expression, the body is the devil's domain. This is centuries and centuries of Western thinking that have acknowledged this. Descartes says there's res cogitans and res extensa, and the body belongs to the res extensa, to the material world. And this is why a wonderful booklet by La Métrie, L'homme machine, Man is a Machine, was against Sartre. And he said, well, and we today would even acknowledge this, especially in AI, consciousness is just very complicated matter. Yeah, the materialist philosophy turned against this exaggeration of the consciousness, and even some of them said, der Mensch ist, was ist. We are what we eat, and many self-help books try to convince us of this. There is a forgetfulness of the body. Kant doesn't really acknowledge the existence of the body. Husserl brackets it. Heidegger's Dasein doesn't bleed, it doesn't sweat, it's not hungry, it's Dasein. And Sartre, the body is the area of the nausea, of disgust. It's not the spreading nothingnesses. That's the body is in fact. So we have a great trouble in Western philosophy to address the body. Of course, Nietzsche was one of the few philosophers who acknowledged the importance of thinking body and mind together, but because he was fighting against such a strong tradition, he became, well, not exaggerating, but he was so fervently trying to convince that the consciousness was nothing, that it's more a reaction than an independent philosophy. Same goes for Bataille, who was fascinated by a torture practice in the Orient, Ling Chi, which is the death by 1,000 cuts. You can find it if you're a cruel person on YouTube. That's they would hang someone on a wooden framework, and then they would cut 1,000 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter bits out of it, and that would be the punishment. And you see this poor guy, of course, given opium to survive it, being reduced to nothing more than a very, very sad piece of flesh. And for Bataille, who was actually a very shy librarian and never really experienced anything spectacular in his entire life, that was a wonderful example of transgression. Here we see that consciousness can be completely overwhelmed by the body. So the great importance of Merleau-Ponty is that he gives a balanced approach of the relationship between the body and the mind. So the phenomenology of perception, I'll be very brief, just some examples. We have to be true to the phenomenon of perception. But what is perception? Perception is primarily not a way of knowing. Perception is not a way of knowing, it is a way of being. So we perceive with our entire existence, not just with our eyes or with our mind. We perceive knowledge. Well, perception is a way of being. And perception is always from a perspective. This is the mindness of Heidegger. Every perception is perception from a certain position. Always. There is no spectator mundi. There is no overall view of the world. There are only perspectives. And every perspective is motivated. It's always dynamic. It's anticipating. It's in a context. We never just look. You're always having to, if you go to a zoo, I'm not saying that you have to, but you go to a cage where there's a panther, and maybe you can quote a wonderful poem by Rilke, and you either see the bars, which houses the panther, or you see the panther. You have to look away from some things to see other things. This is perception. It's a dynamic, anticipating, it's a phenomenon in context. And actually, in our existence, there is the primacy of the I can above the I know. Every one of you who drives a car or plays the piano or another instrument knows this, understands this. It's the primacy of the I can. If you play the piano, there's no knowledge there. Actually, if you start thinking about what you're doing, something terribly goes wrong, especially more perilously when you drive a car. You have to be, it's the primacy of the I know, of your bodily embedment in the world over the I I can, above the I know and I think. I'll give you an example. You may test this when you go home if you take the subway. Imagine that you go to the subway, the metro station, and the electric escalator is broken down. Just do this as a test. You'll see that Merleau-Ponty is right. This is not his example, my example. There's a notification on the escalator, out of order, doesn't work. You walk towards it, and there's something very strange happening. You have to, and this is not me in my age, I promise you, there's something wrong. Your body, your embedded cognition tells you it's an electric escalator and it will start moving, and it doesn't. You feel discomfort. This is just a very innocent example of that it is impossible to ever gain a completely cognitizing position in the world. We are always dedicated towards the world. This is the point that Merleau-Ponty makes. We cannot reduce ourselves to consciousness, and we cannot reduce ourselves to the body, but we have to make the endeavor of a practical, fruitful, and inspiring articulation of what Heidegger called disclosure, unconcealment. This is what happens in perception. The world discloses itself and remains closed and unperceived in many, many other respects. And Merleau-Ponty was fascinated by the life of Paul Cézanne, the painter. Paul Cézanne, he even wrote an essay, wonderful essay, Le Doute de Cézanne, the doubt of Cézanne, which is not a Cartesian doubt. That's very important. He plays on that in that title. Cézanne was fascinated by the Mont Saint-Victoire, a mountain in the south of France. And every day he went out and he started painting the mountain. And then when the painting was done, he tried to picture it from another perspective and another perspective. And he realized he would never paint the mountain. He would only paint aspects of the mountain. This was why Cézanne, for Merleau-Ponty, teaches us a lesson. There is this multi-perspectivism, or maybe plurivocity or plurality of perspectives that we have to live in. This is Merleau-Ponty's position. And of course, this is against Sartre, but Merleau-Ponty, I'll give you an example. They were not friends at all after a while. Because Merleau-Ponty once said to Sartre, well, you may say we're condemned to be free, but that's not true. That's not true, Jean-Paul. They had a glass of wine, and then Sartre says, okay, what do you think? Well, Merleau-Ponty says, whatever I do, there's always a certain amount of contingency, of force in what I do, things that I cannot control. And of course, there is some piece that is my freedom, where I can make a choice. What do you think Sartre said? It's bad faith. It's bad faith, because how can Merleau-Ponty or anyone say, this is not my responsibility. This is just a contingent, overwhelming situation. And this is where I come in. No, you're in it all the time. You're in it everywhere. But this is. But we will see the plurivocity of philosophy and the plurality of perspectives. I will come back to it in the class on Gadamer, because hermeneutics enters the scene here. But next Thursday we're going to look at another dramatic aspect of the death of God. We have seen that if God is dead, everything is permitted. There's something else, something terrible, another thing happened after that. The nihilism of what Nietzsche called the last men and women. The nihilism of those who only want to have comfortable lives. And I'm going to ruin your Thursday. See you then.
So the poem Awee refers to by Rilke, I think, it is the Panther, which is magnificent in general, but the first 4 lines are absolutely are perfect. I love them so much that I wanted to read them out.
Take it away.
His vision from the constantly passing bars has grown so weary that it cannot hold anything else. It seems to him there are 1,000 bars, and behind the bars no world. And the last line, to restate that just in German, because I really I indulge, but I like the sound of it. Hinter 1,000 Stäben keine Welt. I mean, it's magnificent, isn't it?